Hello, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Clonestar podcast. I am your host, Mike Overton, and joining me in my co-host seat this week is the wonderful Jodie Pickens. Jodie, thank you so much for joining me this week.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. Now, our guest this week is best known for her iconic role as Major Kira Nerys on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. But with a career spanning over 4 decades, she's portrayed strong, complex female characters on both television and stage. Beyond acting, she is a passionate advocate for women's empowerment in media, which is reflected in her first book, Star Trek, Open That Channel, A Woman's Trek. This week, I am so honored to welcome the incredible Nana visitor. Nana, thank you so much for joining us this week to talk about, well, your incredible book.
I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome.
Thank
So
you.
I tell you what, let's really sort of go ahead. What's the saying? Hit the road running. There we go. What inspired you to write the book and why now?
Now is when it came out, which is it's completely by chance. I wrote it mostly during the pandemic.
Okay.
And there was a man, Ben Robinson, who said, I think that there needs to be a book done about the women of Star Trek. They have had huge effect. And if you know Ben Robinson at all in the Star Trek world, he knows everything about every show. He's really an expert. And he said, but I shouldn't be writing it. A woman should, to have a true woman's perspective from the inside. And really, it wasn't this kind of book at all. It was going to be a paragraph of each character, describing the character, describing what people, got out of the character. And I really, hats off to Ben and to CBS to let me take this book into really intimate territory of my eyes on the subject of Hollywood, Star Trek, these women's lives, and the effect that they've had on the culture.
So did you kind of have free reign then on where you could sort of steer the ship, as it were?
Free reign. No, if I had free reign, it would be 1,000 pages. Every woman, every person that I interviewed, because they weren't only women, would have a whole chapter in there. So, Ben very kindly kept reminding me it was supposed to be 200 pages. It's 300 pages. So, that's just the way it is.
Somewhere there are 1,800 pages kicking around somewhere that have yet to be written.
And I keep, I've got an Instagram account, Nana Open Channel, where I just keep giving little bits of stuff that didn't make it. Of course, not everything can make it in the book, but there was the stories from the women and people in the audience to the stories of the writers, the people behind the scenes, the actors. They are all equally impressive and important to me.
So I'm going to jump in and tag in real quick just to say, I got the hard copy version of the book. So sorry, Mike, but that's the benefit of me being in the States.
It's really difficult to buy in the UK for some reason. I think it's now only this week gone on Amazon.
Yeah. Oh, but good. I just want to say this. This is an amazing book. It should be a textbook for every Trek fan or anyone involved in the franchise. Not only does it read well and informative and eye-opening, but it's a beautiful book. It looks great. It feels great. I'm ready for volume 2. So
that's great.
And 3 and 4 and 5.
I'll take all the volumes. In fact, I'll be happy to read all your notes. Just send it my way. I think one of the first things that I would like to just point out is, I think what I got from the entirety of the book is that there's a commonality across the franchise, across the decades, that the women of Trek have experienced. and I think you really uniquely showcased that. Did you expect that going into writing the book?
I didn't I didn't expect the experience to be as challenging or as eye-opening. No, I didn't. I thought that I would hear certain kinds of stories over and over again, and I had to adjust my expectations. It wasn't like that. One thing that I really do think I saw is that Nichelle Nichols really started a dynasty. I don't like to say that because it's so hierarchical. She started a line of women taking accountability, having a role in Star Trek, and taking responsibility for what it means to audience members, how it can change lives. We also have a very unique experience. I know other shows have conventions and talk to the people who watch the shows, but our shows are so based in humanism and showing people possibilities for their lives that we would talk to people who say, you changed my life. Your character made me think X, Y, and Z. And so we can go back, we would be able to go back to work and go, everything matters. We need to be, certainly, I'll speak for myself. I felt I needed to be very thoughtful and very vulnerable and not try to be a hero, but try to be someone that that people could go, yeah, there I am. There I am getting angry too much. There I am making mistakes and being afraid to stand back up. There I am being different.
Do
So,
you think I no, go ahead, Sean. I'm sorry, Mike.
I was just going to say, so
Whoever you
keeping
are.
it on that note,
Yeah.
you obviously interviewed Samantha Cristoforetti. I can never pronounce her surname, so I'm really sorry for that one. Cristoforetti. There we go. The astronaut who
Yes.
was up on International Space Station. I think she's come down now, but was up on ISS when you interviewed. How was that? Because I think she was one of the first to wear a Starfleet uniform in space. I think there's been 2 occasions or 3 occasions now.
Star Trek truly, truly changed how she thought of herself, is what she told me in the interview that I got to have with her. She came to my house and she's just such a remarkable woman. I felt like this awkward dinosaur in front of her. I mean, she's a fighter pilot, an astronaut, an engineer. And when she was a young woman in Italy, in a town in the Alps, there weren't other women to show her that was a possibility for her life. She just felt like she was different and didn't fit in. She saw B'Elanna Torres in Voyager and went, wait a minute, there she is. It's really true. One of the things I learned, Jody, you asked, what did I really learn? And that phrase that they have, if you can see it, you can be it, it's true. People need an example. I also discovered how incredible the resilience of children are. It is, because there would be a child with no one around them in their environment at all to understand them, to give them attention, to give them whatever they needed to feel like they had a future. And they find a TV show and go, I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to create who I'm going to be from this. They find a way to find the good and find a good path and follow it. That knocks me out.
Well, I think it's interesting because I know on your open channel on Instagram you've spoke about your conversation with Michelle Hurd, who was a big part of the Picard series. But she has spoken many times about how watching Nichelle on the original series inspired her and gave her an identity to look to as a young person. And I think it's interesting that we are seeing that now in the franchise, that this is kind of really coming full circle and still resonates for children and for women of all ages. And I think that's what's important about your book too, is that it really showcases that there's an influence happening across the spectrum, across decades.
Every spectrum, yeah.
Yes, yes. I think too, the other part of that I think goes hand in hand with that is the cultural impact that these women represented within their time on Trek,
Yeah.
and how you weave that together with their stories so wonderfully. So I really appreciated that, also, because it is an important part of each of our franchises, right? Like we can go back to each series or each movie, and there's definitely notes of the cultural and societal impact of that era. And
Yes.
I think it also, you talk a lot about too in the book about how those eras also impacted Hollywood.
Yeah.
And how people were treated and how the industry was behaving. Um, and I think it's really great and eye-opening for folks who just see it as the series, or see these as my heroes, but also these are people who had a job, who were playing a character during a time where things might have not been so great for women in the industry, or for people of color, or for women of color. And I think that it reminds us wonderfully of that there was more to Trek, and at that time there was a bigger impact. It's why Nichelle set such a high bar for being on the bridge of the Enterprise in that first series. I think it also is important too when we talk about Majel Barrett Roddenberry, about how she initially was to be number one and then wound up not playing that role, but yet she became a powerhouse, didn't she, behind the scenes, until she fell into the Nurse Chapel line. And then, my gosh, her career in Trek and her impact on Trek just continued. And I think she's an important person beyond what we even realize.
Yep.
I would love to see, if she was let loose as a young woman right now, what she would achieve. Because I remember seeing videos of her describing the things she had to create. She made stuff. She was, she crafted, she did this, she did that. She ran, what the Roddenberrys had together after the series. She was so smart.
Yep.
And she had definite, what do you call that in a bowling alley when you have to put up so that the ball goes in one direction? They put up
like the bumpers.
Bumpers.
Yeah.
She had bumpers on her because of the time. I would love to see her just throw the ball and let it go where she wants it to go and not be so controlled. I think she would be something. I want to go back to something that you said about the effect of women, but it's men too, because men are affected by these cultural and have to have adaptations too. It's not like men are doing this thing. It's the culture that we have at the time doing these things to both of us. And Star Trek had an effect on many men I spoke to. I wish I'd put this in the book. This just happened, where a man who had watched me when he was a teenager and had a crush on Major Kira, he said, and guess what? She's a lot like Major Kira, pointing to his wife. And she was vibrant, and it was like I sensed a healthy relationship between them. And what I loved is that he was inspired to maybe look at women who were a little more full spectrum emotionally and not what you expect and maybe not so reasonable, and to go, no, that could be a partner, because I had a crush on this character who was very much like you. I love that. Also, there was a young man who told me that he was he was the child of a single mother, and that watching Gates McFadden's character, Dr. Crusher, made him, puffed him up at school, because it's like, no, I have a career woman as a mother, just like Dr. Crusher. And it made it shift in his mind from something negative to something positive. That impacted a lot of young men too.
Yeah. So kind of keeping on the Kira Nerys theme for a second, how did your experience as Kira Nerys shape your view and portrayal of women in Star Trek?
You know, Mike, this is who I was and always was. But I shaped myself, I accommodated, I bent this way so that I didn't worry too many people by having an opinion. I stayed quiet, I did this, I did that. And I learned what got me jobs in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And so I adapted to have the career I wanted. And when I found Major Kira, I realized I could drop it all and be myself. And there were a lot of people who told me, you're trying to be a man. That's not how a woman has power. And actually, I was just being who my essential self was.
Yeah.
And we are not a monolith. There's not one way a woman has power or shows love or lives. It's all individual. And if we have the right to do that, and that's what I love about going into the new shows like Strange New Worlds, we see a bouquet of women. It's not just a bouquet of roses, it's a bouquet of wildflowers.
Yeah.
Much more truthful to how women actually exist in the world.
Do you think you would play Kira differently in this time period than you did?
No, because I hopefully, and I believe, I would be given the latitude to be the kind of woman I am, which was like Major Kira.
Do you think, because you speak about this in the book too, about how in this current era of Trek, there seems to be a lot more openness on sets, that there's more awareness, more freedom, women have more power, maybe even as actors than maybe they did in the past?
Well, look, whoever, TV, it's still a hierarchy. And you don't have what the top person is not going to allow you. A writer can write the most fabulous character for a woman, but if the person on top says, nope, we're not doing that story, that's that. So it's really the people at the top, Mike McMahon, what I know of Alex Kurtzman, who is they're hiring women throughout, every level of the hierarchy, and it's giving voice. And there's a woman who's a story editor, perhaps, that goes, yeah, no, that story needs to be told. That resonates.
Yeah.
So it's really about that.
So that brings me to Jerry Taylor. And I think what your book does so wonderfully is it highlights her importance across a couple franchises, especially, but on the whole of Trek. And I think her story is vitally important, not just to the series and the franchise, but I think to the role women played in the series. Would you agree?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And also, I spoke to so many of the women writers on Trek that don't have a voice in this book, and I wish they did. But certainly they inform my voice. And what I learned is that Jerry Taylor, Ira Stephen Bear were mentors and encouraged them and created people who went on to do other work. And she's it's she's encouraging the entire so many threads of new stories and new ability. And he did too.
To
Yeah,
kind
I
of,
think it's yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, to kind of just keep on the Ira Stephen Bear subject for a second, you mentioned the influence of Laura Bear a few times in your
Oh,
book
yeah.
on your character and you personally. Can you elaborate on that impact?
Laura Bear is quite an impressive woman. I don't know any other person who was a professional ballet dancer
Yeah.
and physicist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she is outspoken. She's a character. She matches, you go, of course, Ira Stephen Bear, if you know him, he's quite the character.
Yeah.
You go, of course, it would be someone like this vibrant woman. And she very much had his ear in creating the character and being mindful that this was an important woman character. And also, it was her idea that I don't have to hide my pregnancy. And you have to remember that in the 90s, that could get you fired.
Yeah.
And I expected that I would lose my job. At the minimum, I thought, well, I'll be put in the background and I'll have to hide, and they'll show a close-up of me on Bajor, on a view screen. That'll be it. And it was anything but. It was written into the story. It was an Easter egg for people watching the show when I say to Bashir, and Kira says to Bashir, "This is all your fault." That was an inside wonderful joke. And it was a brilliant solution.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So
Well,
that
and
my
it's
character
such a
doesn't.
part of the storyline, right? Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
can't imagine Kira's storyline without that. Like,
No.
it was such an impact on her character, and uh, it was brilliant. It was
Mhm.
absolutely brilliant.
Yep.
So how do you feel the role of women in Star Trek has evolved from the original series to the newer ones today?
I don't see that they feel a need to be performatively female
Right.
to perform in the way a man tells them they need to be a woman, that they are simply who they wish to portray, how they see this character. And it can have all the lumps and bumps of a real personhood. It doesn't have to be this reasonable, controlled, boxed commodity.
Yeah. So do you think that Star Trek has succeeded in portraying women of the future without being influenced by current cultural biases?
I think we can't. I actually asked this question of a lot of the women, and they were like, I can't answer that. In 20 years, we'll know what the cultural influences of this day were, and we'll see it with wiser eyes and go, oh, that's what we were doing. And we have to maintain a compassion and affection for the time we're living in now.
Yeah.
We simply put, in the 60s, they were doing the best they could to portray women in the future. Absolutely everything, they put everything that they knew. And I think for the most part, that was true for all the decades of Star Trek. And we'll see, we'll be able to judge that once we're through this decade and we look back and go, oh, okay. But it will be there. What's wonderful about Star Trek is that I do think it will be around in 2 decades, and we will see this thread and be able to look back with affection because it's Star Trek and go, oh, that's where we were then.
Yeah.
We can track how we proceed through the decades. It's kind of great.
That is kind of
It
great.
is great. It's amazing. And it's what we want, right? It's what we want from Trek. We want it to continue and carry on and be all of those things. I want to go back to, I think, another thing you do so well in this book, which if you do everything well in this book, so please keep writing.
Thank you.
Please do. But
Wow.
you talk a lot about how actors have had to check a box. So you do a great job of talking about that through each of the series, through each of the decades and cultural influences. So you talk about the 60s and all the barriers they were breaking, but they still were all checking that box of what people wanted to see from female actors on TV, and that was being sexy.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
And I found that, we talk about that a lot, right? At the fandom, we talk about, yes, of course, they had the mini skirts and, the makeup and the costumes and all of that. But to think about it in that way, that here we have these actresses who are performing these roles that we've all come to admire and, hold in high esteem. But there's also these women who are playing these roles, who were doing their jobs and trying to go beyond the box they were checking.
That's right. Because in Hollywood, sexuality was power for a woman. And if you wanted to be powerful and have some kind of, upward trajectory, you had to keep checking that box. Unless you were a character actor.
Right.
Then that was totally different. But then if you were heavy as a woman, then if you are in a romantic relationship, it's probably going to be played for laughs. Yeah. You're probably a joke back then. It's that, what is reserved for our yearning selves, our emotional selves, the person who's going to get all the great emotional experiences was always the beautiful woman.
Well, and they also weren't going to play anything to queer culture at that time.
No.
That was not on TV by any means.
Even in our show, it had to be coded.
Right. Well, and it was coded for quite a while afterwards too, right? Let's be real. I love though how then you take that from the 60s, and then we have that the next thing we get is into the next generation. And the role of women really shifted in a way. Because even though that both Crusher and Troy were both on the bridge, their roles were more, I think you checked the box, caretaker in a way. They were still sexy and they were still holding positions of influence. But Troy was the counselor on board the ship. Crusher was the medical officer on board, the single mother on board. So there was a big shift in the role of women when it hit the 80s.
There was, and caretaker sounds like a negative, and it's not. No. The only thing that is an issue is if there's not a development of character so that you understand. Very often, what happens when a caretaker role isn't fully developed is that they're there to make you understand the lead male better. It's
Mhm.
not, you don't understand, the scene is there so you understand what he's going through, not necessarily what she's feeling. And I feel like very often that happened.
And I think what I took from the book, that when Jerry Taylor came on board within the writers' room, the roles of Crusher, like Gates and Marina were playing, shifted.
No.
Like Jerry
Absolutely.
really influenced that, and I think that's powerful to see that the influence of a woman in the writers' room with a strong voice was able to really take those characters where they needed to be, maybe where they should
And
have been earlier on.
not an autocratic voice. What I
Yeah.
understand is that she opened the room. Anyone could say anything so that creativity flowed. You didn't feel foolish. There wasn't this pecking order where you're scared to talk. So that really it starts to be what you hope every creative atmosphere is. It's a communication and a collaboration.
Yes, absolutely.
She was
Do
brilliant
you?
at that, evidently.
It comes across. I mean, we see that as viewers, right? I mean, it really does. You were a big part of the 90s trek that where women were at the forefront. Don't you feel like that was a shift?
There was a huge shift and there was a huge backlash.
Mm-hmm.
The 90s was a very conflicted time. Women were entering the workforce and people were worried what that meant. And I understood at the time. Men feared for their jobs. Women at home went, what does this mean? My man is going to be spending all day with other women. It was a very threatening,
Yep.
scary time for everybody. And it was new roles. So it coincided with this 24-hour news media
Mm-hmm.
thing. And to fill the time, they took advantage of this way of looking at women as bitches. And it became very binary, good girl, bad girl. And bad girls got people on, to watch the news or to buy the news. So they took advantage of that. And there was this almost demonization of women as they were trying to rise up.
Yeah. You tell a story in the book about when Voyager was about to come out and they were looking to put a female captain as the lead, that you asked to take that role on.
Oh, I wanted it so badly.
I
So
love that
foolish.
story. I love
Like,
that story. I loved it.
it was so foolish, but I really did ask Rick Berman. I can be on the street in front of stage 4 so quickly and remember, because it was bad. There was no casting available, and it was like, I'll do it. I'll step up. I wanted to be captain. Listen, Rene Aubergenois used to make so much fun of me because every time I was in the captain's chair, I was like relishing it. It meant so much to me that he would, in his makeup, come up to me, stand over me, and go, this isn't real, right? But
No, it's real.
now, if I could, and I wish I could, I'd call Renee up and say, Renee, you see, it may not have been real, but it was true.
Yeah.
And if they
Yes.
can see it, they can be it. And seeing a woman in the captain's chair did resonate.
Oh, it changed lives.
Yeah.
it changed lives. And I think that's a testament to you in that moment, seeing the importance of that role and seeing the importance of that role being female at that time. And I you would have been great. Not that Kate Mulgrew wasn't fantastic, but you would have been just as great, I think. So
I'm just
I'm
thinking
glad.
in a parallel universe somewhere there is
Yeah,
Bernard
right?
Visitor as Catherine Janeway. I can just see
Yeah.
it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rick Berman in the streets of Paramount go, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
you could,
yeah.
because I wanted to do both roles. Oh no,
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave Kira. I wanted to do both. I
There's
don't know
also a
what I.
parallel universe where Kate Mulgrew takes over as Kira Nerys.
Yes.
See?
Oh, and she would have been kick-ass, I have to say. That's the truth.
Okay, so the next con with both of you at, we kind of need to do like a table read where you take on each other's
Yeah.
roles. That's
Yeah.
what we need.
That would be fun.
That would be really cool. So kind of keeping them with sort of iconic characters, because let's face it, Janeway and Kira are both very iconic characters. What do you think Nichelle Nichols' portrayal of Uhura meant for women and people of color in science fiction?
Oh, not just science fiction, up in space.
Well, yeah.
It scientists, just, I mean, STEAM, all of it. She changed enormous pathways. What Reverend Martin Luther King said, we are in the future. We're there.
Yeah.
And we're a part of it. That changes it for everyone. And it's not fun to make headway, to be a pioneer. That's not fun ever. It's not like, yeah, I'm doing great things. It feels alone and it feels scary. And I can't even begin to imagine what it felt like for her. I cannot. But she stayed and she did it. And she was never performatively female. She had dignity. She had this grace. And I have such respect for her.
You said earlier on, like, in a way, she set the bar pretty high for women to play roles in Trek. Beyond that,
and how to treat each other,
Yes.
because I remember I have been treated in my past when I was a young woman. I would be, if there was an older woman, I knew right away, lower your head a bit. This may not go well, and it usually didn't. There were people who, said, no, she can't be on stage with me. No, she can't be in the same shot. Things like that. And I understand that, as if sexuality and beauty is power, and these women really should be, these older women who have such knowledge and experience, they should be in the place of power, and it's lost instantly by a younger face. I get it, but Nichelle never treated me like that. She never seemed to feel that she was less because I was there, because I was in the new Trek. None of that. And it taught me a lesson of how to be and how to embrace. It's not, there's not just one woman of power or one woman who deserves to be living. It's all of us. Let's bring all of us in. And that goes for men too.
I think too, it speaks to the ability then that it allowed each of those following characters within the franchise to be representative, to be something for someone that was watching. And it gave them that space to be individualized in a way, and to be put up as a role model or a hero or someone to look up to. And I think that That does not happen in a lot of franchises. And I think it speaks a lot to why Trek continues to be successful, is that we accept these characters, without the weight or the pressure of what has come before, or at least we should.
Yeah.
Yes, I think you're exactly right. And you can look at other places where women or men become boxed commodities, and you can see what that spawns. It spawns people trying to fit themselves into that small space and think that they have to look a certain way, get surgery to have a certain kind of body, this not self-acceptance, and Star Trek keeps evolving a very different answer to that.
Yep.
We talk a lot about
self-acceptance.
Yes. We always talk a lot about Star Trek being kind of a reflection of where we are as a society, where we could be, right?
Yeah. It holds two things at once.
Right? It does.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. When you look at overall the women you interviewed for this book, how much does that hold true through each era? Do we really see does that what we hope for in the future change? Has it changed from era to era with series to series?
I think the cultural part of it keeps it in a world, that is acceptable, but it's always pushed the envelope of what we accept in the moment, right?
Right.
So and then we take that space up. The next show takes that space up, and then it pushes a little further and a little further. That's my experience of it. But I think it's always a little bit controlled by what the culture can accept at the moment. I think we're past that. We're although let's wait 10 years and then we'll meet again and say, oh my God.
Right, I'll book that in now.
Now let's put that
same
down.
date and time.
Yes, exactly.
2034. You got it.
Yes.
That's great. Yeah.
So did any of the women that you spoke to mention admiring their characters beyond checking the kind of sexy box? And that the idea that sex sells is changing?
You mean the women that I interviewed from the original Trek?
Or any Trek, to be fair.
Well, I think that kind of... Here's the thing. There's nothing wrong with checking the sexy box. You only have to look at 7 of 9.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you, and I'm honest about this in the book, I thought, oh, that's the end of Trek. Everyone always thinks the next show is the end of Trek anyway. Oh, there it is. Now they're just selling sex. Because I saw this giant, fabulously gorgeous woman in a skin-tight suit on big posters all over Hollywood. What I didn't do was watch. And when you watch, she is a character that is so gorgeously developed.
Yeah.
And that's all that needs to happen. She was given time. She was given a massive agency. So, all the things that can be boxes that we talk about are bad are only boxes if that's all you can be. Caretaker, warrior, sexy, beautiful woman. It's only if that's all you are.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of 7 of 9. I think Jerry I always
Are
say
you,
this about
Jody?
Jerry.
You know what?
I don't know if you knew.
This is the first that I've ever heard of this.
I'll try and be more transparent moving
Oh,
forward.
okay, thank you.
Will. Yeah.
But I am too. I am
Yeah.
too.
But I
And
always
it's
say this. I think
so
that
many groups.
Jerry took that role beyond the cat suit.
Yes.
She didn't
No
need the
doubt.
cat suit. And I
No
think
doubt.
what
She
I
could
am
have worn a
learning, or what
cardboard
I,
box.
yeah, really,
Yeah.
she really, I mean, that I think that character would have spoke to people without the need for it to be overtly based on sex.
But now when I think about it, isn't it great that it caused us distress?
Absolutely.
It's a good thing now to look at. Why?
And what I'm learning from the younger generations coming to Trek, they look at it completely different.
Yeah.
They don't even acknowledge it as a sexist role until maybe they've gotten into it a little bit and gotten to know the character more. And I think that's
all you
such
need to do.
Right.
That's
right.
all you need to do is actually watch the arc.
Mm-hmm.
It's a gorgeous arc.
Yeah,
it is. It is. That leads me to kind of a sidebar question, but exactly how much Star Trek did you have to watch to get this book done?
How much Star Trek I had watched was...
Or did you watch?
I watched the original. As a young woman, I watched the original Star Trek on reruns, just like everybody else. I watched maybe 2 Next Gens, and I watched our show. And that was it. I had to watch them all. I had to watch many, many episodes of each woman's role to understand where they were. And sometimes I just, like Voyager, I just kept going because it was Kate and Jerry and this huge arc. So I watched a hell of a lot of Star Trek. Too fast, and it's like none of it, probably I won't be able to tell you specific episodes because I just watched them once. I need to watch them lots and lots to really have even the ones that I watch a lot, like shows that I've done podcasts on of our show, it becomes hazy to me. But I mean,
also, there's only 900 and something plus episodes, so I mean, I can't possibly imagine that coming hazy.
It's quite amazing.
It is.
And all it was just, it's amazing to see. And each time I became a fan of each woman, of Tawny, of Sonequa.
Yeah.
I was like, I talked to a whole bunch of Discovery women at this convention in England.
Yep.
A whole bunch. I got a whole bunch done. And each one was like, but Sonequa, oh my God.
Yep.
I don't know what I do without Sonequa. I don't know. To the point where I was like, did they all drink Kool-Aid? This is weird.
They've all been hypnotized.
Yeah. I don't trust this. This is like they're told. The French, I told them to say all this stuff about Sonequa. And then I interviewed Sonequa. And I understood what each woman was talking about. She is someone I go, watch this space. I truly believe that she will be a force in the industry, and a good one.
Yeah. I mean, I know every person that I've spoken to who was on Discovery has always said the same thing about Sonequa. Everybody, whether that was male, female, straight, gay, doesn't matter. Everyone has said the same thing.
Add my voice now too, because I experienced her. She's thoughtful. She's open. She doesn't protect herself. If she makes a mistake, she looks at it and talks about it. I mean, it is an evolution of humanity. I am so happy to see.
We need more. Okay, we need clones. We just need many clones of Sonequa throughout the world, and there we go. That's the human race saved. There we go.
Do you had the opportunity, obviously, to meet a lot of these women that are a part of current Trek. You even got to revive Kira on Lower Decks, which was
Yep.
phenomenal, by the way. That made every fan of Kira and Deep Space Nine go through the roof.
Yep.
What has changed from the time that you were in 90s Trek, entrenched in 90s Trek, and what are you seeing now with these women?
I'm seeing that they accept that's just the way things are, much less,
Good.
much less than we did. They seem to have broken free of a trance that we have to behave in a certain way, or we're out of the business. And even to the point, I'll say this, for myself, having a career, being an actor, it was the most important thing. So what do you do to threaten someone who wants a career so badly? They say, you do this or there are 10 more behind you.
Mm-hmm.
And I would bob and weave because there was so much I wouldn't do. But at a certain point, I feel like maybe I should have made a different decision. Maybe it wasn't worth the bob and weave that I did. I don't know. But somehow these young women have found a way to go, nope, there's strength in numbers. And I think there's an awareness around the globe that that the way things are, that's just the way things are, isn't a way to live.
But in a way, they wouldn't be set up in this situation if you maybe hadn't played your cards the way you did.
Well, I like that thought. I like that
I
thought
do
a lot. Because I could, in my character, I could be the person that I actually was, and it now am in my own life. But that took, and really looking back, really made me own myself in a very different way. Writing the book was very instructional. How many times do you really go back to 20, 30 years ago and go, wait, why did I think that way? Where did that come from? It's an instructional thing to do.
Yeah, I can imagine. How do you think Star Trek has played a role in inspiring women to pursue careers in STEM fields?
If they can see it, they can be it. It's not like, well, women just aren't interested in that. Can I read you just one thing from the book? Is that okay? Let
Please
me
do.
see if I can find, yeah. So there's one, and I think this answers your question. There's one particular story that has stayed with me. When I was on the Star Trek cruise, I interviewed a woman called Alice. It's 1973, she told me. It was career day at high school. There were 1,100 kids in my class. I was number 24. I mean, I wasn't valedictorian, but I was in the top 2% of my class. So I can't wait to talk to whoever this counselor is and ask what my options are. Where should I apply for a scholarship? This is going to be fun. I sat down with this middle-aged man, and he told me how great it would be if I became a nurse, a teacher, or a secretary. My balloon sort of burst there. I'm thinking, no astronauts, not even in the realm of possibility, no NASA, no scientists, we're nothing. So then I'm thinking to myself, yeah, what the hell were you thinking? You're not supposed to do that. So I became a nurse. Just so you know, Alice hasn't regretted the 43 years she spent being a hero, nurse, and knows how many lives she has touched. She was inspired by Nurse Chapel, but back then Star Trek didn't have any female science or security officers, and the culture of the time didn't even acknowledge how good Alice might have been at those jobs. So it's more that women have always been interested in STEM, in STEAM. but they
Yep.
were not encouraged, and often, so often, from what I have heard, were actively discouraged.
Yep.
Had professors in college who said, okay, you won't be here next year, you won't be here, you won't be here, you won't be here. And he was pointing to the 4 women in the class.
A product of their era.
Yes.
A product of their era.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure he thought, let's cut to the chase, let's not waste your time.
Yeah.
But he didn't realize that when there are just very few people, they may need encouragement, they may need more mentorship.
And I think that actually leads me on to my next question perfectly, which was, how do the stories that we tell on screen, particularly Star Trek, impact societal change, especially regarding gender?
I think slowly. Change is slow.
Yeah.
It's becoming, look, people didn't like Kira's anger and the fact that she was a wounded animal in many ways at the start of the series. But once they got to know who she was over the period of 7 years, suddenly the fact that my character was quick to go, look, let's kill them all. They're a threat. That's it. She was military. She saw, very quick solutions to things. That was her upbringing. That was her experience. They could start to accept the full spectrum of who she was and look back and go, I understand why she was angry.
Yeah.
Now I get it. So it's slowly, it's time, it's falling in love with people, with characters, and then being able to being able to have compassion for them, like we do with people who we love.
Yep. Was there a kind of common thread to the experiences of the women that you interviewed?
Yes, very much so. And it went to decades. As Nicole DeBoer told me when I asked her, how was it, the game of Hollywood? Because she's younger than I am, but it was the same era.
Yeah.
And she said, well, a friend of mine said it, well, everything was just a little rapier back then. And it was acceptable.
Yeah.
I tell a story in the book that I probably can't tell here of an agent.
Free reign. You can say whatever you want to say. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm 60. I'll tell you the story here. I'm 60 years old. A lot of experience behind me. And the head of the agency I was with, decided that he was going to let me go. He didn't want to represent me anymore, but he was going to give me one last chance. So he invited me to lunch, and he did some interesting things. He sent me to one restaurant in one part of town, and then said, no, actually, I'm in a restaurant an hour away. Come here. So right away, that's a power play. Okay. And I went, okay, no, I'll do it. Head of my agency. And I met him, and he, amongst lots of other outrageous things that happened at that lunch, he said, look, in order to get you out there, I need to feel that I want to fuck you. You need to be fuckable to me. And then once I feel you're fuckable, I need to feel free enough that I can fart in front of you. Then we can work together. And I froze, as women often do, because that's a neurological response. And I didn't get up and go, are you kidding me? Don't you ever speak to another woman like that again. I didn't do that. I sat there and went, my career. And as we left the restaurant, he looked down and I had high heels on. And he went, okay, now you're fuckable to me. But what it was this the lunch wasn't about me at all. It was about him and how he felt about me and how he was instructing me on how to make myself acceptable to him. And I went back to my manager and I said, I'm leaving the agency. And he went, you will be blackballed. Trust me, he'll do it to you. He threatened it at the lunch and he said, he will do it to you. And I went, okay, but I didn't contact him again like he told me to. I did nothing. I didn't go and visit the agency, and he let me go. And that, going back and examining my behavior, is number one, I accept that freezing is a neurological response to threat, and that was very much a threat. Number two, I could see clearly the manipulation of men with perceived power in this town, having no respect for a 60-year-old woman. None. I mean, and my age actually shouldn't make the difference.
No.
Speak to no one, no man, no woman like that.
No.
That you have power over. So that's what Hollywood was like and remained to be like. Now, I do believe he was a dinosaur. He grew up in the times I did and thought those rules applied. And less they do, there's more awareness. There's certainly, you talk to a creator like Mike McMahon and you go, yes, please. Yes, please run shows like this.
Yep.
Respect everyone. Yes, someone has to make the final decisions, but it doesn't have to be a hierarchy that every level is protected with fear, or you're going to get fired.
Yep.
So I'm going to be hard on the person underneath me. It doesn't need to be like that.
It doesn't. And I think you bring up a good point that there are people out there like Mike McMahon, and I even think Kurtzman, that they're trying to change the landscape. I think it also speaks, and thank you for sharing that, Nana, but there's a lot of transparency in this book of significant traumas that impacted careers and behaviors and roles. And I think that's so important. And I thank you for sharing that in the book and here, simply because I think far too many women can relate. And I think it's important that fans of these characters and these actors understand that there is similarity, there is common ground, there is shared experience.
Exactly.
And I think you did a beautiful job of showcasing that also.
And I so believe in the communication so that women of all ages can go, think through that scenario, and if it happens to them, not freeze.
Yeah.
Well, right. And I think, too, it speaks to a lot of what your message is in the book, and is that we have to learn and grow. And if we talk about this, then hopefully it empowers someone to be able to face it differently or to meet the challenge differently.
Let me ask you, since you read it, Jody, what do you come away with? Is there something that in your life you can see differently? Is there any kind of a paradigm shift?
So I'm going to answer that in two ways. First of all, I didn't really deep dive into the fandom until about a little over 2 years ago. I've been a lifelong fan, but I'd never really gotten into it, the thick of it. And the first thing I noticed was that there wasn't a lot of talk about the women of Trek. There was a presence and there was an admiration, but we weren't talking about them and their experiences in the way I felt we did a lot of the male characters and actors. Your book filled that void. And I think it does so in a necessary way. I think it does so at a time in our world when we most need to be talking about women. So it filled that void for me. But the other thing it did was, so I grew up, I was a child of the 70s, a teen of the 80s. And that era for me was very much so in a house with myself and my sister, my mom and my dad, and my parents were very much so supportive of independent kids. These girls could do anything they want if they set their mind to it, which really contradicted a lot of the era in which we grew up in. But being able to watch Trek and see women in the future leading, surviving, having strength and going one-to-one as counterparts and equals was empowering. But being able to hear the stories of the actors and what it was like being women in their era, trying to do their job, was understanding, relatable. Because for as many times as you get told, yes, go do that, you may get told no, or absolutely not, or you can't do that because you're a woman. 100 times. So there is a more of a familiarity, I think, to the stories that are told here. And I think that is going to resonate across the fandom. For men, for women, gay, straight, whatever. I think these stories resonate and they are necessary.
Yeah.
We have to talk about them and we have to grow and learn from them. I'll step off my soapbox now.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you for telling me.
Well, no, I really feel strongly about it, and I will tell everyone I know to read this book because of that. Not because it's wonderful to see this evolution of females in the franchise and how women have, evolved. But it's important that we are sharing these stories. It's important that we're sharing these stories in this era right now. Because we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to the people out there doing the job now, and we owe it to tomorrow.
Agreed.
So I'm ready for volume 2 is what I'm saying.
Everybody is it's so fascinating. It's just everyone's story is so rich. Really, I'm sure I could go out onto my street and into people's homes. And that's the lesson for me. The minute you start to really open someone up and learn where they've been, where they are, where they hope to go, you fall in love with them just a little bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just wanted to touch back on something you said a little bit earlier. You said you started writing this book during the pandemic, and then obviously touched upon the time you spent in London with the actors from Discovery.
During the pandemic.
I was there. I briefly bumped into you in the hallway. It was quite funny.
Yes.
I'd just come out, and then all of a sudden there was you, there was Andrew, and there was a couple of others, all kind of like being ushered towards the pub for dinner.
The one pub.
The one pub.
I ate fish and chips every single night.
Is fish and chips better in America or in the UK?
No, UK, come on. No doubt. No doubt. I said it like it was suffering. I was thrilled to eat fish and chips in England every night.
So how long did it take? How long did it take from start to sort of finish? Because the books, it's pre-order, isn't it? It's October it comes out.
Yeah, October 1st it's out.
That's it.
So it's coming up. Um, I'm so bad with linear time, but I would have an interview, um, and then go. uh, I had an interview with Andrea Kindred, who was an executive. You know who she is.
Yep.
And it was a wild interview. She was in Australia. It was over Zoom. And I went, okay, I don't know enough about bias. So I stopped and I read several books on bias to educate myself. And then I would talk to a young woman and go, okay, I don't know how young women are thinking about feminism. Wait a minute. And I'd find a book from a young author and read that. And then I got to interview her and also the woman who wrote Jessica Nordell, The End of Bias, which is, by the way, a fantastic book. So it was a stop start for years and then watching all the Trek. And then because I really couldn't start writing until I had filled my brain
Yep.
with so much stuff. There was one week that I watched, and it's worth doing, and I highly recommend it. Look up you don't even have to say misogynistic commercials from the 60s and 70s, but that's a good way of getting the top. And they are remarkable. You cannot believe how far we've come when you watch. You'll see how far we've come when you watch these commercials or reading print ads of the time. And it's a constant barrage from TV, how you're supposed to behave, how men and women are supposed to behave, magazines, everywhere that the culture was, it was messages on what we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to behave. So, it was 2.5 years, I would say.
Because I was just trying to think back now, because I mean, London was 2020. That was 4 years ago.
Yeah. So more. Oh, so more. No,
Yeah.
see, I'm bad with linear time. I had started that, but probably when I started writing
Sorry.
was
London was
2.5
21,
years ago.
actually. Sorry, I got that wrong. London was 21. It was supposed to be 20, then it got cancelled. Yes, it was 21, sorry.
Yeah. But I did those interviews. I did the boat interviews. I went to Germany and interviewed the scientists at ESA, and wrote pieces that ended up not being used at all. But what those pieces did on each scientist was inform me.
Yep.
And it just started to go, okay, this is one of those threads that everyone is going through.
Yeah. So Star Trek obviously reflects the era that it was created in, as obviously well as hopes for the future. Do you believe this dual reflection is important as its futuristic vision?
I think it's a wonderful way to look at what's come before us, how far we've come, and also amazing to not see something and then look back and see it and go, okay, there's another layer of the onion. There's more to learn. There's more complexity here to uncover. And you see it in every decade. And it's not to say that the original Star Trek, was just sexist. It was very much, we can look at it and go, okay, the 60s had these messages for women. It had these messages for men.
Yeah.
This is how you are supposed to behave. Now, within that, let's look at what they were projecting, which was some amazing stuff.
Yeah. We've spoken a lot about boxes. Do Do you think the boxes will ever disappear?
Yes, I do. I think they are. I think, look at Strange New Worlds. I don't I don't see many boxes, and
No.
I see huge differences. I know that when Siddig and I had our son, Django was born just before midnight, and Sid had a 5 o'clock call, and he called in and said, "Is there any way it can be delayed?" And the answer was no, show up. And I was talking to someone about the first episode of the new season of Strange New Worlds, and he said, "Well, Anson wasn't here for that." I was like, "What? What do you mean? The star wasn't there?" No, he was on leave because he just had a baby. If that isn't a shift, I don't know what is.
Yeah. That's quite a bit. That's a massive shift as well
It's a massive shift.
in the right direction. And that's the main
Mhm.
thing. And I think that's the
Yes.
kind of the whole encompassing message around this is that we need to be heading in the right direction. We
Yeah,
can't
and
be
that's
taking
how
steps back.
Right. And we can look back and see, oh no, that like looking at the commercials, you go, no, we've come a long way and we can't go back to that.
No.
That's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
Really do.
You,
I encourage you to look them up.
yes. Yeah.
Yep. Definitely will. We will. I think we'll find a couple and link them in the description of the video.
Good. Perfect. Perfect.
You talk about this in the conclusion of the book, but can you talk a little bit about how writing this book impacted and maybe even changed you?
Hugely. As I said before, thoughtfully looking at my behavior, at even the way I made a snap, and of course it was a snap thought about Jerry Ryan, but it was unconscious bias, really, that a sexy, beautiful woman, I see what they're doing. Because a sexy woman is powerful and it's going to make them money, and that's the next show coming up, and that means something about me. All that thinking, all that thinking that kept me from actually watching it and appreciating another woman's spectacular work, great stories, insightful things that would help my life. And also, that's just sometimes, unfortunately, culture doesn't want people to embrace each other because it's better if we're separated.
Yeah.
And so often women are put against each other as if we're in competition with each other. I looked at that in me and had to struggle not to just see it as ugly, but to see it as learned behavior, and one that I was flushing down the toilet. And if it takes flushing twice, that's what I was going to do. Get rid of it. So it impacted me that way. It also made me so upset in retrospect about ways that I had behaved, things that I had accepted, such as the story I told you.
Yeah.
That I became a little militant around my family, around other people. It was like, I'm never accepting anything again. And of course, you can't call people out. You have to call people in, as far as I'm concerned. Call people in, make them understand what it feels like. Why? What is the neurological basis? If a boss, if you are a businesswoman and you walk into your boss and all he does is look at your breasts as you're talking, what is happening? What's happening is that now you are thinking, your body can't help it, seems like threat, and you are under a certain kind of threat, but your body takes it as it's very black and white. It's not like, well, this is a threat in the workplace. I may lose my job if I play this wrong. It's I'm going to die.
Yeah.
So what happens is you go into fight, flight, or freeze, and it steals your brain. You no longer have access to your prefrontal cortex. So whatever you're talking about, you can't communicate as clearly as you could if he was looking in your eyes. That's why it's a big deal. Because you steal people's focus.
Yep.
You hijack them. And that's why it's a power play.
It's a big message in the book, right? I mean, it is.
What?
It's a big message that this book carries with it. And I hope that people take it for all the levels that it offers, because there's a lot to be learned from the book you wrote.
Thank you. It's one woman's eyes on it. I'm so happy to hear what other people feel, get from it. This is open a channel. Let's start the communication. And it started with you. You are the first people that I have spoken to who have read it. So it's you are. So it's pretty cool. So it's not just, theoretical.
Yeah.
This is the discussion that I'm thrilled to have.
I'm glad. I'm sorry that more people haven't read it yet, but they're going to, I promise you, because it's a powerful book. But can you talk a little bit why you called it Open the Channel? You talk about it in the book, but
well, it was one of the most meta moments of my life that I was, so just think of this. I was on DS9 saying open a channel 2, open a channel, communicating with people on a view screen. There was a little girl in Italy watching me do that. I was in theoretical pretend space. She was in the Alps. Now jump to this moment where I am in Germany in front of a view screen, and I hear open a channel, and it's to the space station, a real one. And this young woman comes bouncing towards the camera to speak to me from a real space station. Open a channel. My brain bounced 10 million places trying to understand the reality of that and having a conversation, something I never thought I'd do, having a conversation with someone in outer space on a space station who watched Star Trek, and part of her inspiration came from that show. And now she's living it. So I was telling this, I was having lunch with Brian Fuller.
Yep.
And I was telling him this story, and he said, "That's your title." And from that moment on, it was.
That's a goosebump moment.
Yep. I have goosebumps.
Oh, I had goosebumps just telling me that story. Come on.
Oh, I had a reaction that I did not expect. After we said goodbye, I turned around and burst into tears.
Yeah.
Burst into tears. It was such a big, big moment.
Well, as a woman, as an actor who got to pretend and play this character and play out these scenarios, I can't imagine as a creative soul how empowering and impactful that moment had to be for you. But I thank you for sharing that. I will never forget you just telling us that story at all, ever.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you.
Then I tell you, I could talk to you about this book. Like, I think I have 912 questions about this book, but but I'll be honest, I want you to come back on the show and talk with us, because I just want to talk about your experience watching Trek.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I just think it would be so interesting as someone who, you've been in it, these people, you have been at conventions with these folks. They're part of the family.
But that didn't really, that completely changed when I watched the shows and I fell in love with these characters. Yeah.
So on that note, then, it's normal.
She's on our side of things.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you the Adam Driver question, which bit off the cuff, which is, how do you deal with watching yourself back? Because I know when I spoke to Andrew Robinson about this, he says normally can't, but Garrick, I can watch all day because of the prosthetics.
Yeah.
How do you deal with watching yourself? Because obviously you've watched DS9. How do you deal with watching yourself back?
It's weird. There are a lot of things that happen. I don't have a good memory. It's another long story, but I got kicked in the head by a horse glancing, but trust me, that's enough.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other story. But I could watch a show and remember being off stage, off camera, and having a conversation with Avery or the director, or how I felt that day. It's such a weird experience. It's so it's like sensually rich, because I'm watching this young woman. My senses are remembering what it was to be that. I rarely look at her and go, oh, I wish I had done that differently. I'm too enmeshed in the moment that was, the time that was, what I was experiencing. So that's weird. I don't know what to make of that. It's not really like watching a performance. It's more like falling back into the time.
Yeah. It's almost like when you hear a song that you haven't heard for a really long time, but you remember how it made you feel the first time that you heard it.
Yes.
Yeah.
There it is. That describes it very well.
So just before we look to wrap things up, Jody, do you have any more questions to ask?
I have 912 questions to ask. But
have you got anything booked for the rest of the day?
Are you available for the next 4 to 6 hours?
Yeah.
But I will call it a day, I think, on that for now.
So for everybody watching and listening at home, you can pre-order the book now at most good bookstores. We obviously recommend sci-fi.com, and you can use our discount code CloneStarPod to get 5% off. The book is available from the 1st of October. We definitely recommend 100% go and buy a copy, go and read it. I hope there's going to be an audiobook, fingers crossed.
I hope so too. I hope they choose me. You can't.
No, get Kate Mulgrew to read it.
Yes. Actually, that would be great. I'm actually really okay with that.
That'd be really cool. Remember, we have just launched our Patreon, so your support there, it's as little as $2 a month, and that helps us keep the lights on and obviously help get incredible guests such as Nana on the show. Remember, you can catch up with more Clone Star podcast at clonestarpod.com. But until next time, live long and prosper.